Good evening from Tokyo. A warm welcome on behalf of the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation to all of you. We meet tonight for the Women in Japan event, and we'll talk about how to achieve breakthroughs in female business leadership. I'd like to welcome our two experts today, Ms. Alexandria Swanson from the Federation of German Industries and Ms. Keiko Hamada, journalist and former editor-in-chief of the Business Insider Japan, joining us once more. I also like to warmly welcome yet again our moderator for tonight's debate, Ms. Shiori Kano, chair of the International Humanity Platform. It was late Prime Minister Abe, and yes, we are all very grief-struck by his assassination on Friday and by the tremendous loss his death will mean to Japan. And so it was Shinzo Abe who called for a Japan in which women will shine. He announced at the T20 meeting in Tokyo in 2019, in front of a very eager audience, a decade for promoting women. He adopted the coined term womenomics in 2012, and the government has tried since to increase women in businesses as entrepreneurs and as CEOs, and also to increase women in workforce. The latter has been somewhat successful. The proportion of women in Japan has risen steadily. The percentage of women who lead, however, has not significantly improved. The question is, why hasn't it? And this will be our main subject today. Together with our three experts and with your active participation, we hope to find answers and some pathways forward. It is about time to break that glass ceiling and increase the number of responsible women in working environments. Hence, I'd like to thank everyone who participates tonight. We are looking forward to your engagement, to your comments and your questions. And before I hand over to Ms. Kano, a few words on the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. We have been in Japan for over 10 years now. The organization is a renowned German think tank and looks back at 60 years international work, and we operate in 120 offices worldwide. In Japan, the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation cooperates with numerous institutions, with the National Diet, political parties, think tanks, universities, and government branches. The event today is part of a series where we look at and analyze women in Japan. Previously, we discussed women in societies and came across obstacles such as mindsets that need to change in order to accept equality and educational boundaries. We discussed the cultural obligations women need to push aside, and clearly they are there. The event following today's one will look at women in politics. Coming this fall, we will then focus on solutions for increasing female candidates on all political levels and for more appointments of female political and governmental leaders, clearly needed. We noticed already in our first event, where we briefly discussed all the three pillars, namely business, politics, and society, that the underlying challenges for women to advance in either of those fields are similar and interlinked. And here's a bit of commercial. You can find all those events on our YouTube and social media channels for a recap. And by far, Japan is not the only country with disadvantaged women. This is a global problem, and we therefore tend to look at countries which do better. And for today, we pick Germany as a showcase. In the seminar, we will present industry and government policies which have been introduced to increase female CEOs, for example, entrepreneurs and business leadership. But in spite of rising numbers, Germany is nowhere near equality. And to pave a better way to equality, that is our claim tonight. And we have a tough and well-known moderator for this. Shiori Kano herself made gender equality and women advancement her call. She is a lawyer by profession, graduated from Tokyo Law School, and from 2009 to 2019, she was elected to the House of Representatives and focused on constitutional and human rights issue during her terms. Next to presiding over the International Humanitarian Platform, she advises also the Parliamentary Association for Human Rights Diplomacy. And I don't think we could have found a more suitable partner for our Women in Japan series. And so again, let me warmly welcome all of you. A big thanks to our two experts again. And now over to you, dear Kano Sensei.
Thank you, Ms. Brower. And I'm Shiori Kano. I will be serving as the moderator. You maybe know me as the Shiori Yamao. And so I used to serve as a public prosecutor. And after that, for 10 years, I served as a member of the House of Representatives until October last year. It hasn't been less than 12 months since I left the office, public office. So 9 out of the 10 are male. And that is the structure of a diet. And I've been involved in this diet affairs for 10 years. And looking back, there's a decade. And so the status quo made by the men, in order to change that, that requires female power. That was what I was felt strongly. So the women represent women's power and also the power to change the status quo by using of a new power. That's how I see the women's power. But having said so, especially the member of the Diet or the representative of House of Representatives making breakthrough, breaking the ceiling of 10% of female representation is difficult to achieve. And so what we learned is that that requires a female power. In order to achieve this, what is necessary? So with the expert from Japan and Germany and you, the audience, I hope that today's session will serve as a for us to learn tips to do so. I'd like to take some time to introduce the panelists. Today, from Germany, we have Ms. Alexandria Swanson. And so she's from the Federation of German Industries, BGI. She's serving as the managing director. Also, well, the name of the project is a hashtag, She Transform IT. And so through this project, she's engaged in activities to enhance advancement of the women. And after hearing from her keynote statement, we would like to hear from Ms. Keiko Hamada. I'm sure that you know her very well, and she is the journalist and also a former editor-in-chief of Business Insight Japan. And so she has a long career as a journalist, and women's issue has been one of the topic she has took very much interest in. And to me, when it comes to the gender issue, whether Japan face a stagnant situation or making progress, well, even if you are delayed in making progress, and what we can do is to make a further step forward. So I hope you can learn some tips to do so through the discussion. And so today's event, well, first, we are going to hear from Ms. Swanson for about 15 minutes. She will be talking about the current situation in Germany. And after the keynote statement, there will be discussion between Ms. Swanson and Ms. Hamada. And so for the following 30 minutes, we welcome your questions. And so that we can talk about those topics together with the experts. We have some questions sent in already. Also, and so you are also welcome to send in your question. We have a Q&A box, so please send in your questions to the Q&A box. It may be difficult for us to go through all the questions, but we'll try our best to go through all the questions. I'm sure there are commonalities in the questions that you may pose, and so we would like to take up the essence of the questions that you may have. So when it comes to the language, we do have a language selection. button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So please select your language of your choice. We do have an interpretation, simultaneous interpretation. And also this event will be recorded. So please be reminded that this will be recorded. So without further ado, let's start. I'd like to call upon Ms. Alexandra Swanson, and she will talk about the situation of Germany and the change to be happened.
Hello, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Kano, for the introduction. I hope everybody can see my presentation now. But before I begin, I would just like to again share my condolences with everybody on this call with regards to the assassination of your Prime Minister. My grief and my thoughts are with all of you during these difficult times. My apologies. And now moving to the topic, we have about 15 minutes together, which I'm super excited for. So to talk about breakthroughs in female business leadership with regards to insights from Germany. Every day here at She Transforms IT, you know, the Federation of German Industry, I look at questions with regards to how can we improve female participation within digitalization, innovation, and within the German market in general. And we only have 15 minutes, so I have a brief outline with regards to what I'm gonna talk to you all about, and it's basically three aspects. So the status quo, it's going to be a mix of numbers, but also different kinds of visual input. So where are women actually working in Germany? I'm not sure how much you all know about the German market, so I just wanted to give you a brief overview, but then also looking at where are the women leading, because we don't only want to make sure that we have a high female participation rate, but we also want to make sure that women are in these key leading positions in order to bring about the necessary change that we need for a more gender equal society. In a second step, I'd like to look at policy action that has taken place in Germany with regards to increasing female participation, as this could lead to possible policy recommendations for Japan and what could be done in order to increase the 10% number of female leaders in that market area. But then also we know that policy isn't what guides everything when it comes to changes within society, especially with regards to female empowerment. But we also need to look at, and I'm excited to show this German perspective of what's happening in society. So what's happening with regards to the language, the topic of the female quota, the Frauenquote in Germany, but also the compatibility of family and career, as due to COVID, there's been a huge discussion of homework, remote work, but also the topic of unpaid care work, and kind of the fact that a lot of this care falls on the female and not on the male. And how can digitalization improve our lives in general, but then also how can it improve female participation within the work market, and how could that look like? So status quo, where are the women in these positions? And as promised, I said I'd just give a brief overview on numbers. So I'll start on the left-hand side. We see that in Germany, we have a very high percentage of women who are active in the market. 70% female employment rate, which is among the highest within the OECD. The male at full employment rate then therefore is at 78%. However, within the 70%, we see that 43% of females experience full-time employment. So that means that they're working, plus 30 hours a week. The male comparison there is 61%. However, the much more interesting thing is that we have 47% of females who are working part-time. And we can get into the discussion of this expectation that after a female has a child or multiple children, that in order to accommodate the lifestyle for the child, to make sure that somebody is home for care, we see a lot of women who after childbirth go into these part-time jobs. And this also has huge externalities and consequences, not only with regards to how much money a female is paying to the pension system, but also the gender wage gap. And interestingly enough, we see that the gender wage gap in Germany is at 20%, which is 6 points above the EU average, which is at 14%. And again, the huge issue here is that if females are working part-time, they're not receiving the necessary human capital that they would normally need in order to experience promotions, but then also to increase on the so-called ladder and break the glass ceiling. And then on the right side of the chart is looking at the breakdown of where women work, because we want to make sure that women are not only fully employed within the market, but we also want to make sure that they are working in different sectors that can allow for their impact to be most heard. So In Germany, we see that 31% of women are working in education, health, and social work. And these are generally female-dominated, low-paying jobs, which is again leading to the gender gap, but also the female employment part-time issue that I had mentioned earlier. And we see that in comparison, only 9% of males are working in these fields. And when it comes to other topics such as science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or so-called STEM fields, which is where we see a lot of innovation and digitalization happening, we only see 7% of women. Overall, we have 17% of women in IT, which is a huge issue in Germany. And there are lots of different measures that are being taken in order to counteract that, but then also different kinds of initiatives, such as She Transforms IT and others as well. And then I would just like to briefly go over, sorry, I hope you don't see this. I would just like to briefly go over, so where are the women actually leading in Germany? Because we want to make sure, we know that 70% of women are active within the market, but how many are actually leading? And we see that 29.4% of women are in management positions, but again, this is across all sectors. So this means that we have women leading in healthcare, leading in education, but then also these typical care jobs, which are generally low paying. And Germany is, within the EU ranked 20th. So this is definitely not a spot to brag about because the EU average is right about 34%. And when it comes to the topic, we know that only every third leader is a female. But what does this actually look like for women on executive and supervisory boards? Because we know that is where we need more women. Statistically speaking, we need to achieve 30% of women within these boards in order to see the necessary cultural change to happen, female perspectives to be not only listened to, but also heard and implemented in policies that are therefore changed. And so here's a great example of a depiction of the percentage of women in shares in different executive boards. On the left-hand side, we have executive boards. On the right-hand side, we have supervisory boards from the time frame of 2006 to 2020. And this clearly shows females are at the bottom. We have an upward trend of females being involved in 3 different kinds of companies. So companies with government-owned shares, top 200 companies within Germany, but then also the DAX 30 companies, excuse me. And so where are the biggest trends and where are the biggest improvements? So with regards to executive boards, we see that companies with government-owned shares see the largest increase. However, with regards to supervisory boards, as executive boards and supervisory boards have different functions, we see that, interestingly enough, within the DAX 30, we see plus 22% between 2006 and 2020. The reason why I will get to in a next step. But here, I think the overall story is in Germany, we saw for a very long time, we didn't see a lot of growth when it came to this topic of female involvement, especially in 2001. That's when a lot of the discussion started. But with certain measures that were taken, which I'll get to, we can see that the trend is upward and that it is increasing, and that even within society, we hear the conversation a lot more. So policy action, what is being done in order to increase female participation and leadership within the German market? And I made a little bit of a timeline with regards to about 9 different aspects that I think have been key societal, but also policy movements that have happened in Germany that have seen this development socially, but then also females questioning their role within society, their role within work. And before I begin, I would just like to point out that between East Germany and West Germany, with the divide of the Iron Curtain, and the fall in 1989, we have seen very diverging paths when it comes to that. I'm happy to bring that up in the discussion, but for now, I'm mainly going to be focusing on West Germany. So I'm going to start at the starting point when it comes to female equality and emancipation. November 30th, 1918, female suffrage. We see that all women can vote. And then, we kind of have this staggering, Germany was involved in 2 wars. Females played a huge role when it came to that. However, in May 3rd, 1957, something very interesting happened. Women were allowed to finally open their own bank account and manage their own assets, which might sound like a very basic principle or concept. However, this meant that women were then therefore provided equal rights. They were able to make their own financial decisions. And even up until 1977, women in West Germany were still required to get the permission from their husband to if they wanted to take on a job, to make sure that this was compatible with their family and marital duties. And the picture to the right, I hope you can see it. There is Kinder, which is children, Küche, which is the kitchen, and Kirche, which is the church. These were kind of the 3 Ks that embodied the typical role of a German female. And this was at home with the children, the provider who cooked and provided a lovely house, and was also religiously active and raised the children in that way. So these are generally called the 3 Ks, so to say, and this was up until 1977, but the cultural legacy can still be felt today. And in 1980, another huge milestone was taken: equal pay for equal work. And again, while we know that gender pay parity has not happened at a de facto level, we know that at a legal level, that this equal treatment of men and women is within the Constitution, but also with regards to pay. And so moving to 1994, this is another big step. This is after reunification. Women need to be in jobs. People are noticing, okay, we actually need more power. And how do we get more women to apply for these jobs? And, as a part of the adoption of the Second Equal Rights Act, they said that job postings must be addressed according to both genders, so male and female, using M and F. So if you look on a German application, you would see that this application is actually, applicable to both genders. And this might sound like a very basic thing, but there are lots of studies that out there that show that different verbiage and different language actually impacts the way that women see a job, see themselves fitting into a job, and essentially leads to them applying for a job or not. Recently within Germany, this MF has now been added with a D for diverse. So this is a big topic that's been happening right now. And also, other key things that are happening, this, these laws are essentially promoting the compatibility of family and career, especially for women, to make sure that the burden doesn't fall on them. And fast forward to 2001, we see that companies are now realizing, in order to stay competitive with global and international markets, that they need women to be in these decision boards. This is just modern. This is just how business is done now. And in 2001, companies self-commit to increasing the proportion of women in leadership. This was not due to a policy, but these were, therefore companies saying, we recognize that this is an issue, we want to take it on. However, 14 years later, not much happened. And German laws took a step forward and said, you know what, we will now mandate a minimum of 30% representation when it comes to each gender on supervisory boards. And that was kind of my point before with regards to the difference between supervisory boards and executive boards. That's why we saw that huge increase with regards to females within executive boards, or excuse me, supervisory boards at plus 22% as a part of this mandate. And in 2019, from a cultural aspect, International Women's Day here in Berlin is a public holiday and is definitely seen as a day to fight for those equal rights, and to use that day as a power, as a way to change the status quo and talk about these topics. On a more current level, in 2021, there was another law mandating companies that were listed on the market with 4 or more executives must appoint at least 1 woman. So we've seen lots of development since 1957, where women could open their own bank account, to making sure that women were equal and represented on boards as well. But what does this look like today? And I have a graphic here. It's from the Federal Ministry of Family Affairs. For family affairs, senior citizens, women, and youth. And it talks about the development, or it shows the development of women in leading positions and the development since 2015. And I do hope that the animation works, because it's very nice. But, we see in 2015, we start at 21.9% before the quota was implemented in 2015. And since the implementation of the quota, we see a total increase of 13.3 percentage points with regards to women in leading positions. And so This is a big discussion within Germany. I can get to that briefly, but we can also discuss it in the chat later. You know, the overall narrative here is that quotas really do work when we implement them, and we have mandates. If you know you don't meet them, then there are other measures that need to be taken. And this topic has also been seen as huge within the EU. So recently, just last month, the EU agreed that companies will face mandatory quotas to ensure that at least 40% of women are on corporate boards by 2026. So the development will continue. And briefly, with just a couple of minutes left, different societal aspects that I would like to briefly touch upon with regards to language, the female quota, compatibility of family and career, and the role of digitalization, as these are definitely topics that have, since the pandemic, increased exorbitantly and have, you know, in my opinion, before my role here, I was working at a PR consulting company, and these were topics that we were dealing with some of our biggest clients with. And I hope that this kind of puts some of it into a little bit more perspective. So for those of you who might not know a lot about the German language, is that it can be gendered. So it can be based off of a male or female. However, the general form is that you can change the end in order to kind of compensate or to make something female. So the way that you can do this, there's many different ways, and there's tons of discussion about the best way to so-called gender or include the other gender or multiple genders, in fact. You know, is it either with an asterisk, is it with an underscore, is it with a slide? But the general discussion here is that, you know, we need more equal language for equality to arrive. And this has been a big discussion since 2001. Even the German dictionary Duden says that they want to make the feminine form even more visible when it comes to their online work. And this is also a topic that's been brought up within the industry. So Audi even says that they want to use more diverse language and have provided their coworkers and all of their workers with different kinds of kits on the best ways to do this. So while we don't see that this has been implemented on a legal side, we see that this is something that is moving society, and people will even start to gender now when they're talking in spoken language. The female quota, as I briefly touched upon, huge debate, and I'd be happy to talk about it. On the one hand, we see that, you know, lots of different newspapers are reporting the quota actually works. We see that more managers are in these different boards. Spiegel International says, okay, Germany, you need to get it together. You actually need a gender quota, which we know that they implemented. However, on the other side, you also have young female women who are saying, I'm actually against a female quota in my party, because currently right now within the Christian Democratic Union, they're talking, Friedrich Merz, the leader of the party, is talking about, you know, currently implementing a temporary female quota, which is something that is a really big development for the party within itself. However, when it comes to the different investors, we even see that, you know, I picked this quote from Miriam Wohlfahrt, who is, you know, definitely an influencer and a huge voice when it comes to FinTech Foundation in Germany. She says, and this is a quote that I think really embodies the discussion on the topic, is, you have a lot of people who say, look, I used to condemn the female quota, but now I'm actually convinced that we need it as a way to start to get more women into these jobs. And when it comes to the compatibility of family and career, this discussion, you know, exploded during home office when everybody was at home. Everybody started to realize, oh my gosh, unpaid care work takes so long, and who does it generally fall on? It generally falls on the female, right? So according to the federal ministry here in Germany, they said that they found that every day women perform an average of 87 minutes more of unpaid care work than men. Over a lifetime of 85 years, this is a total of 5 years of unpaid care work that is you know, undertaken. But then here, on the other hand, the federal government sees themselves as taking an active role when it comes to counteracting these inequities of unpaid care work. So whether it be expansion of daycare for children, because in Germany, you know, the so-called topic of Ganztagsschule, or school for the entire day, doesn't exist everywhere. So a lot of times, school ends at 1:30, and that means that somebody needs to be home in order to take care of the children, in order to make sure that they have lunch. So how can we expand daycare to work for everybody? But then also, how can we involve males and the father within the role? So how can there be additional parental bonus and leave for the male in order to make sure that they are paying their equal part as well? But also there's, other transparency acts when it comes to pay that have been passed. So we see lots of initiative and lots of movement here, not only from the civil side, but also from the federal ministry as well. And on a last note, I'd like to briefly talk about female breakthroughs in the role of digitalization. So, undoubtedly we are in, we're finding ourselves in a digital world. Germany's not the best at digitalization, but we're getting there, and it's a topic that's being talked about and dealt with. But a total of 59% of Germans say that they consider digitalization will likely improve their balance between people's work and private lives. And so we know that digitalization is an opportunity for more equality. It provides remote work, which is something that wasn't very common in Germany, right? So we're kind of seeing here a cultural change happen as well. We know it saves commute time. Studies have proven that it increases productivity. People are generally happier as well because they see that there's this synergy between their private and professional lives. And it also allows women, when it comes from, not only hard facts, but soft facts. So what generally doesn't allow for women to increase on the ladder is lack of experience, lack of education. But generally, if we're talking about night school, this happens at night and you have to go somewhere. However, digitalization allows for women to do these things at home during non-typical so-called hours. And also other things that are super important to future business success, the topic of networking. Generally, this is something, statistically speaking, that wasn't accessible to all women, because when did networking happen? Generally after hours, when the female needed to be home, cooking dinner, taking care of the kids. And so now we see that networking is happening in different ways. It's happening online, it's happening in LinkedIn, it's happening in chats, it's happening in different communities. And we also, the topic of visibility, again, we see that due to digitalization, women can be more visible on LinkedIn, on their websites, on social media, and allowing them to get their name out there. And with regards to care work, there are loads of digital tools that actually make this organization easier. So we need to embrace the role of digitalization, but we also in general need to embrace the role of the female to realize what a wonder this could be for economies, for our society, because so many studies show a more gender equal society is happier, it's more productive, and it's more successful. And this is also something that is applicable for companies as well. So I'm happy to talk about it in the discussion. At this point, I just want to say thank you, dankeschön, arigato, and feel free to connect with me. I apologize, that was a bit longer than expected, but I love the topic, and I loved talking to all of you, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Swanson. So the most interesting is that only every third leader is a female. That was very interesting. Only 1 in every 3 are leaders. So that is an issue. So as you know, in Japan, we have not been able to go beyond this wall of 1 in every 3 leaders. And this gender gap index has been announced by the World Economic Forums, and this year Japan is 116th. So Ms. Hamada, I would like to ask you, before Japan was ranked 120th, and now we are 116th. Is this something to celebrate about? Well, it has gone up, I mean, just by the virtue of the numbers, but we have a drop in 10 countries that participated. So this year we only have 146 countries instead of 150 countries. So the importance, the score has actually fallen by 0.5 points. So it does not mean that the ranking has actually gone up. And another point is that, especially in the business field, I think we're talking about the business field, but in the economic field, so there are 2 areas where Japan is particularly low. This is in the political and economic areas. Especially in the economic area, we are ranked at 121st, which we have gone down. And in the management or leadership positions is very small. So that is an issue that Japan must face. And that is what is actually bringing down the ranking level of Japan in this ranking. So from here, we would like to go on with a discussion between among us. So I would like to throw the ball at Ms. Swanson from my side, but in your presentation, you talked about people who used to be against gender equality and now have switched to gender equality. And given that kind of a situation about the quota system, for example, so first, I think we had a lack of human capital, and that is why people were reluctant to move forward with a quota system. So in Germany, the self-control guidelines did not work, and so you came up with a quota and it started to work. So if you could elaborate more on that from your German experience, I think this is something that we can also refer to in Japan. So if you can kindly elaborate about that from your German experience.
Absolutely. So you also mentioned an important part, human capital. So when it comes to education in Germany, we see that women are only 8% lower when it comes to education, because this is the general narrative is, men are more qualified, they're more educated, they know more, but also remember the networking part, they also kind of have access to that as well. But this isn't necessarily the case anymore. Women in Germany are highly educated, professional, they are experienced, and they have this knowledge. And so that was kind of, this huge discussion, this issue is, we saw in the early 2000s, it was this question of where are the women? Why can't we get women into these positions? However, the issue is so much of the societal expectation. And I'd love to talk about it, is that there is this huge expectation in Germany due to mother care and the protection of the child, which is also something that is protected by a law. So again, the government plays a huge role there. In Germany, there is a large maternity leave. So you can take 1 year, you can have up to 3 years off, and you still have to be able to, you can go back to the position, they still have to offer you your job, etc. So there's not too much of this pressure to go back right away, which was what we see in other European countries. For example, in France, we have a very different story of, women have a child and then they go directly back to work, which then therefore makes it easier for them to gain more human capital and more experience. However, here, the system not only says, we want to support you, we want females to stay home because this is good for the child. However, there is so much societal pressure when it comes to women staying home. I guess 2 things that I would like to point on. I get asked currently if I work part-time, and this is something that is, this is a culture. I'm from the US as well, and for me culturally, this is so shocking that it's expected that a female in my age would work part-time, because I might have children and I have to be a good mother. And this is something that even a study in The Economist brought up, is the topic of Rabenmutter, raven mother. You're a bad mother if you don't stay home for at least 3 years, or what about the poor child? And so these are different cultural things that are happening right now. It's being talked about. I think a lot of the data is showing that. So now I've gone off on the cultural aspect, but when it comes to quotas, in early 2000s, we saw that nothing was happening, and they saw that in order to improve things, we need this quota. There was a huge debate. There still is a huge debate if we need it, but like I said, I think the general narrative is, if we really want change, which a lot of people do, and if companies really want change, and if we, within German society, we see that everybody is equal. Okay, so how can we make it equal? And the only way that we can do that, if the market can't regulate itself, which didn't happen for over 40 years, if the market wasn't able to regulate itself, where can the government, within the realm of the social market economy, where can the government take active steps in order to do that? So I think a lot of it is this mixture of social market economy in Germany, but also this idea that we're all created equal, and how can we make a system that works for everybody? And if we notice that it's not working, then we need to take other measures.
Thank you very much. So Ms. Hamada, so just listening to what Ms. Swanson just said, so in Germany, even if you compare with other European countries, maybe they're a bit close to Japan, and so there are a lot of pressure in terms of what is expected of child rearing, or people in our age are working part-time as a matter of course, and this is another wall that we have to overcome. So now they are starting to see results in Germany. So if you compare the situation in Japan, where are we? What is the situation? Well, in Japan in the early 2000s, the corporations, simply the major corporations, began to focus on this matter of having both home care and work and balancing it. And many people in the field thought that maybe they already had enough of those tools and systems in place. So we do have the system in place, but so what is the problem then? So one issue was that it was only targeting women. So it's not a system for women only, but for example, if a male employee wants to work for shorter hours or to take some time off for child rearing, that is also possible. That should be possible. So this kind of gender differentiation was very strong among the people who were not the actual target. And so that is what caused a delay in moving forward with this kind of system. So even after two decades, we still have this mommy track phenomenon. So in this 21st Century Career Foundation, they did a survey, and about 40% of women are in the mommy track. So that means after giving birth to a child, they give up their career. So what I think is important is that we need to support having both private and work. And this is only and it's for both male and female. And so we need to provide a career support to the women as well. So why is it that the women in the management positions do not go up? And many people also mention that it is because the women themselves do not have that kind of mentality or the will to take up those positions. And so what is actually making these women so reluctant to take up the leadership positions? We need to go back into the background and find out why they are cornered into such a reluctant position. And so I think people are afraid to try to have both a career and a good home life. And so as a policy, before this becomes a life event, I mean, after you join the company, if you start a career, they start taking on very tough types of jobs. And there's a company called Japan L'Oreal, which is part of a French global company. And in the French main office, they have 50% in women in management position. And in the Japan office, they have 40% women. And they're not doing anything special. And uh, for the benefits, it's no different from any other Japanese company. But when they join the company, they are completely equal in terms of providing careers and job experiences to both men and women, including the toughest jobs. That means that gives the women more self-esteem and confidence. And so even after giving birth to a child, they want to think of coming back to work on a full-time basis, not at a part-time basis. So it is a way of encouraging the women to feel that they do have the confidence and power to do so. And by doing this from the very beginning, when they join the company, they fall into that mentality. And so they feel that they really have high expectations by the company. So the one reason why Japanese women leave from the corporate community is because in Japan, according to surveys, they really have this burnout syndrome where they lose the willingness to work, and they don't tell this to their bosses, and they use family matters as a way of excuse to justify why they want to leave working. But if they want to work, if they really want to continue working, then they will be really empowered to do so. And so if they feel that the colleagues and the company do not have high expectations for women, then they are really put into that cornered position. I think I understand what you are trying to say. So, Ms. Swanson, just listening to what you said, did you experience something similar in Germany? So, I mean, you will not get fired, but the moment you give birth to a child, then you are put to a different career path. And how do women actually overcome this kind of challenge when that happens?
Yeah, and this is a topic that I've recently been dealing with a lot with my friends as well. You know, we're in our late our late 20s, and so a lot of people, and this is you know, even generally we have this idea that, oh my gosh, we can't tell somebody how old we are because all they think is that we want to come to this job and have a child and then we'll leave, right? And so these are different stereotypes that also need to be talked about. However, when it comes to this topic is, you know, the mommy track, I think that is exactly what it is. But this is the part-time topic of Germany, right? So you have women who are very successful, super well educated, probably studied law. These are generally where a lot of the statistics come from, studied business. However, they go into the job, they have one child. And then there's also, I can't share my screen, but there's different studies with regards to earnings relative to from when you have a child to after you have a child. And within Germany, we see the largest gap between Denmark, Austria, Australia, Great Britain, and Sweden. So that means that after you have a baby, you lose so much when it comes to human capital, but then also re-entry within the market. And so what do companies need to be doing? Companies, you know, just as you said earlier, companies need to be having these discussions with women, talking about what it means to reintroduce them into the work market, that they want them to come back. But it also means that these discussions also need to be had with the male counterpart, that they can take leave, right? Because in Germany, that's legally mandated that men can take leave. Or excuse me, it's not legally mandated yet, but different companies have that. And so how can we make that legally mandated to make sure that it doesn't fall completely on the woman? But these are huge discussions with regards to, you know, this expectation of you have a child and the expectation is that you come back part-time, right? And so nobody ever fully expects for the female to take on this responsibility, because kind of, as you mentioned, is people are like, oh, is the female strong enough? And I love my boss, and she told me this, and I have a female boss, and this has just been such a great experience. And she goes, you know, a man never told me that I couldn't do all of this, that I couldn't have 3 children and still lead, you know, this department. She goes, it was the females who always told me this. And so this is kind of what I meant with regards to the cultural legacy of, you know, this picture of the 3 Ks, the children, the house, and the church, is that there are still so many conservative ideas about what the role of the female is, and how can we as females also empower each other and use different tools, use our community and network as a way to provide us support that we need in order to make family and career compatible. So this is a huge topic. And like I said, when everybody was in lockdown in their homes, they finally realized, oh my God, this is a lot of work. And so how do we make these things work with each other?
Thank you. And Hamada-san, so there was a very interesting input. So we would like to continue with this topic. So earlier, the L'Oreal, the French company, like you cited as an example. So the male and the female, they should have a sense of fulfillment in work equally. So the equal career opportunity, well, it's not based upon a traditional way of thinking, like working 24 hours a day. So that's not going to work going forward. So when you think about that, so as you heard from both of you, the digital, well, using digital positively is also very crucial. And on the other hand, it depends on how digital being used. 24-hour working model could be a reality. So there is a risk here then. So how we can hit the good balance and set the good working models. I just felt that way. So I do cover various companies, and work from home is now very popular. And so for those who are engaged in childcare and elderly care, I think the digital and work from home is working positive for them. But not just introducing work from home, but together with and so the work from home, the flexible working hours. And so the job base, the employment is a similar concept. So that just assignment to be clarified. So if that assignment is fulfilled and the location and hour doesn't matter. And so those are the type of approach introduced by the companies. So for those who are that take care of the child, and so that the child will come back from 3 in the evening. So and then her core time will be morning hours and also late hours after the child go to sleep. So the work and the private life is seamless. I do work from home partially, and so I write an article, and sometimes I took some time off and then just cook. And so it was regarded as a negative, like bringing work to home was considered to be negative in the past. But as you actually practice it, like it gives you a flexibility, like during the working hours at home, and then you can take some time off to do some kind of a private chores. So if a couple are working from home, both of them, and if the husband doesn't do any type of housework, and that will put some more burden on the wife. But if they are working from home, both of them, and it's easier for the housewives to tell the husband to go and pick up child from the daycare center. And so now the COVID is winding down, and then the companies are encouraging employees to come back to work, to office. And then the tendency is that male tends to be willing to go back to office work. And so if that happens, and then they may go back to the old way of working. So what's interesting about this research result is that promotion or the appointment of subordinates from the view of um, uh, the managers is what they view as an important factor is the communication, the time spent in communication with the subordinates. So the female workers, if they go to office, they spend more time communicating with their bosses. But if there is a separate group of people who goes to work home or who goes to office to work, and so all the middle management who are in a generation where they love to go to office to work, and then they may favor the one who come to office to work rather than those who are working from home. And if there are any gender um, differences, and then that may hinder the appointment of a female to the managerial position or the promotion of the women. And so you talked about the concern about the total working hours, and I have interviewed so many companies, and for those companies employing the work from home type of approach, they also research into how many hours actually worked. And some companies find out that the employees are now working a little bit longer working hours than before, but they are taking more sleeping time as well. So because there's a less time they spend for the commuting, so it is working positively for both work and private life. And Ms. Swanson, what about in Germany? So work from home is one of the typical case of using digital in a positive way. How that can be used positively to empowerment of the women, and even after the COVID. And how do you think that digitalization can be used to positively affect the empowerment of the women? I have about 10 minutes for the discussion.
Okay,
So if you
perfect.
have any questions to Ms. Hamada, also you should also ask a question to Ms. Hamada.
Yes, so digitalization, it's a huge topic right now, not only because, as Ms. Hamada mentioned, COVID is slowing down. So it's this huge question of, okay, what's going to happen? Are we all going back into the office? Are we going to remain flexible? Are we going to remain in home office and kind of have all of these these benefits that we've experienced and kind of the perks of working from home, this flexibility of being able to cook, being able to go pick up the kids, drop them off, go grocery shopping during the day and not, saving it for the end of the day. And so right now it's a huge discussion. Nothing has been legally mandated. So companies are, doing their own things. So a lot of times there's going to be different interviews within companies. I think one of my favorite quotes is that I would rather have more flexibility than the fruit bowl, because that's kind of a joke here in Germany that it must be a very nice office if there's a free fruit bowl or something, right? And so a lot of people are saying no, we actually really have learned over the course of the past 2.5 years that we can work from home. We are responsible. People generally work more, are more productive. But then how can we make sure that we don't go back to the pre-COVID, pre-pandemic time and fall back into this old system. As that is definitely what we're seeing. And so before COVID, and that's kind of why Germany had a lot of issues when it came to going fully digital. A lot of companies didn't have laptops for their remote workers. So it took them a long time in order to get the so-called digital infrastructure in order for them to work from home. Okay, so now everybody has this digital infrastructure. Companies have also sold their offices. A lot of times they don't even have a place for their employees to go back to. So it's really a discussion that's still happening right now, but the general narrative is that people want this flexibility. We don't want it to be taken away. And a lot of companies are doing kind of a mixture. So where I'm working right now is we say 60% of the month you can decide where you want to be, and the other 40%, whatever is business relevant, you need to be there in person. So that's not only that aspect, but when it comes to the role of women, this is a huge aspect that we can see, that women can, not only be, you don't have to move to a specific location for a job anymore, but you can be doing that remotely from a different city, because that is generally, statistically speaking, another big hurdle. So a female generally moves to a city, generally speaking, statistically, moves to a city for their partner, for their male partner, because they're going to be the higher wage earner. And so how can a female also supplement that with, and therefore be by taking a different job? However, if that job isn't allowed in that city, she is less likely to move to that other city. So if we can use remote work as a way to increase not only female participation within the labor market, but also to increase female leadership, then we should definitely do that. And like I mentioned, I think some of these basic things, such as increasing your network, making, a female more visible on social media, but then also the continued qualifications that can still happen digitally and online, and that doesn't need to take place in a specific location on the weekday or after work. These are huge benefits with regards to the digital life. And sorry, just one last thing. My boss always told me this. She goes, all of these business trips, these transatlantic business trips, she never really got to take part of them because they were always, for an entire week, which is a very long time. So a lot of times females are not included in these bigger, important business trips because they don't want to be away from their family. Like, people will mention, oh, you're away from your children. What a terrible mother are you? Da, 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 da. But now that everything is happening digitally, I mean, I can talk with all of you in Japan and Tokyo right now, and that's amazing that I can just be a part of this. And so the power of virtual meetings, I think, is also something huge, because women are, we all have the exact same square on Zoom, right? So we all have the same theoretical power in that sense.
Thank you. And so, Ms. Wanso, do you have any particular questions to Ms. Hamada about the topics here in Japan, particularly to Japan?
I do. I think my biggest question would be, what is going on culturally? Do you think that, with regards to the topic of female empowerment, the quota, do you think that this is something that can be legally instituted, and do you think it will be accepted?
Yes, I think Ms. Kano is more knowledgeable about this, but when we talk about quota in politics, we had a lot of resistance, so we haven't been able to realize quotas yet. And in the businesses, by 2020, to elevate the number of people in management positions up to 30%, that was the goal that was set. But we were not able to accomplish that. And so on the average, we're about at 15% instead. So now we have postponed that to the earliest possible timing in the 2020s, and it is still not an obligation. So the other day, NHK did a survey to the major 100 corporations, and 50 companies responded that even in the 2030s, it is still impossible to meet that level. So if we set a quota or obligation, I think we will have a strong resistance from the business community. So if we make the numbers into an obligation, then we will have a lot of heated discussions. And as Ms. Swanson just said, unless we make this into an obligation, I don't think the businesses will really try to pioneer and find the very knowledgeable and skillful females. So it took 30 years to triple the number of women. So that's a very slow speed. So in order to speed go to increase the speed, we need to calculate it on the other way around. So what is the rate that this company has to increase with females in management positions? I think the companies have to start this calculation. So my question to you, Ms. Swenson, is in Japan, we have this kind of discussion. Many people say that no, females are still not capable of taking a leadership position. We always have the kind of opposition. But if we make this into a legal obligation, did you have the kind of discussion in Germany? And then if you need to really elevate the numbers, what
Yeah.
kind of development programs did you have to bring up the females? Did you change any policies, or what measures were taken in Germany to make this happen?
Yeah, so I can highlight a couple of examples from a couple of business cases. So a large PR firm here in Germany, back in 2020, they implemented, this was completely on their own determination. They wanted to do it by themselves, but they realized that in order for the company to develop internationally, but for the company to be creative and innovative, as multiple studies show, companies are more successful, more resilient, but financially outperform other companies if they have female leaders. And so a lot of this I call courageous decision making came from the CEO who is, definitely a very strategic mind and knows data quite well, and said, you know what, if we don't do this now, then we'll be so far behind in 5 years, right? And so it takes these pioneer minds, we need males and we need females and all of the genders to help kind of talk about this topic. Implemented that. So that meant it took about 2 years to develop the program, and they hired an external company, and that meant creating Women of Work, which is called WOW. So different kinds of WOW programs. I think this is something that I would be interested to know on the Japanese side. Is this something that's being talked about? So in Germany, these are, different qualification programs, but also different female networks as a way for females to empower themselves. There are different performance reviews that were, that happen every 6 months with regards to personal development. So making sure that females, receive preference, but then also to make sure that they have the necessary qualifications when it came to leadership skills. So they were offered, different coupons in order to continue these different kinds of skills. But then it also meant lots of difficult conversations. So I think the way I understood your question is there kind of a backlash if a female gets into these positions? And the question is yes. So something that I have often experienced, and this is on the topic of the female quota, is in German they'll say, ach, die ist eine Frau, die ist eine Quotenfrau. She's just a quota woman. And that's the only reason why they're there. Obviously, this is not true. A lot of women bring qualifications with them, and these aren't the things. But I think a lot of times these comments come because we are challenging, a patriarchal system that has been in power for thousands of years. And so we are seeing preferential treatment of women in these positions. And that is what happened. I think, in a lot of different companies and societies, you are going to have that backlash. That did happen in the company that I worked for and the client that I was working with. However, I think when this happens, you have to keep the overall goal in mind, and the overall goal is gender equality for all. And so what does that mean? It means that at some points we have to make these exceptions. And that's why I chose that quote from Miriam Wohlfahrt, who's kind of, this strong female who says, you know what, I used to be totally against it because there is a lot there's a lot wrong from a fairness aspect when it comes to quotas, because a man might be just as qualified, but they're not getting it and the female is getting it. Or am I just being reduced to the female who is just filling this quota, right? But it depends on what do we want? What is the goal? And if the overall goal is to increase female leadership, then I think that is something that we have to take kind of take with the argument then.
ありがとうございます。浜田さん、今の受けてい
Thank
た
you
だい
very
て。
much. So, Ms. Hamada, your comments about this. And then from here onwards, we do have a lot of questions which we would like to also take into consideration. So we did have the same question that you asked, Ms. Swanson. So in Germany, there is, so are there legal frameworks in Germany about making this into an obligation? And the answer was yes. So this was a hint that we got. And Hamada-san, I thought that for voluntary actions, if we switch from voluntary actions to having this kind of legal framework, that means if you have the ability, then you will get a chance. I think that will become possible by having this legal support. Yes, there are some companies that are really proactively searching for female leadership. I think they are digging for more good prizes. That is the mentality they have. So for this new section manager position, if the superior always takes care to have double the amount of female candidates to fill that position, there are some companies like that. And also some companies mentioned that females, when they're called upon, they are more reluctant. And so if you try to lure a position to a female, and if you also want to have a man come into that position, at least to the female, you should call her 3 times, where you only call a man 1 time. So in global companies, they have been really working on having a global management position for women. But from the Japanese office for that company from 2013 onwards, I think they had a slowdown. And then in 2018, they came up with a new program called W50 of having 50 candidates to fill management positions. So this kind of development program, once you are chosen to be that, then the female candidates are actually surprised. They feel that, wow, are people really having that kind of a high expectation on me? So yes, that you need to really ensure that the people around you have high expectations of you. And then by calling on these people, they gain confidence and they will be more willing to accept those positions once they are offered. Yes, that is so true. So by calling on a female candidate for a major position, you get envied by the people surrounding you. Of course, we're all human beings, but if we turn this into an obligation or a legal framework, that is another excuse or way to legitimize that kind of appointment. So I think that is one of the effects that we have from making this into an obligation. But only because this is an obligation, that alone does not move things forward. And to realize a gender equality in all areas, we need to also continue telling the story that it is the best thing to do to promote gender equality. So my question is to both of you. So by having more females in management positions, what is the benefit to the corporations? That is the question that I got from one of our seminar from our people. So Ms. Swanson, do you have the answer to that question?
I hope I have the answer, but before I answer, I think one thing that I do always want to point out is we can't, because the topic of quotas keeps coming up in the chat. And so not everything can be mandated, because I think once we mandate everything, we say, we are stigmatizing the fact that females are, maybe unpreferentially or unfairly being promoted into these positions. So this is a discussion that needs to start from early on. This is an entire lifespan of education, making sure that gender equality is something that we strive for. It's not only something that is written in our constitution, but it is something that we believe in a whole state, and in our whole body and our whole mind. And so when it comes to your question of kind of, what companies, why do we need to convince them? And I think that the main goal is just look at the facts. And this is kind of, something that I've been talking about to lots of CEOs, male CEOs in Germany, right? Who will tell me, we need these women. And so there are women out there, there are qualified women out there. And these women are going to make the workforce more successful. They're going to make it more diverse. I think, there's tons of studies out there that show, the benefits of having a female boss. I can benefit from this as well. I finally have a female boss, and it's like, I've learned so much from her personally, but then also companies are financially more successful. So what are companies looking to generally maximize? They're looking to maximize their finances. And so if you want to do the best thing for your company, the best thing is to invest in a female.
Hamada-san, いかがですか?
Hamada-san, what about you? Yes. So I think from a civil rights point of view, I think we should also call for gender equality, and also the corporation also needs to maximize profits. So if we have this kind of untransparency, then what kind of needs are out there going forward? It's really difficult to foresee the kinds of needs, and we need to have a diversified human resource organization. I think that makes the company more capable of taking in those issues. And another point I would like to add is that, especially in Japanese companies, I think there is this risk of conformity. For example, the Japan University, Mitsubishi Electrics, these are examples of where the top person and the board members were all males in the same kind of age group, coming from the same university. And we have seen repeatedly what kind of bad points that we see from that kind. So these people only see a very small world, and then they end up making really stupid judgments. And they are totally apart and separate from the society, and they don't see that. They are blinded. I think that is the biggest risk that Japanese corporations are facing these days. So in order to be able to accommodate diversified needs, I think that means avoiding this kind of conformity risk going forward.
Yes, as I said at the outset, so the female and well, they need to exert their female power. At the same time, they are also newcomers, and the new power they can bring into the workforce. So those are closed worlds, traditional worlds, the rigid world, and they have a rigid way of thinking or making decision. And the women can be the ones to bring in the new breeze into those traditional world. So next question, this is also relevant to both of you. And so I'd like to ask this question to both of you. So Ms. Swanson, you talked about among the Germans, a male CEO, and how benefit, how useful the women's workforce are. And the Germans, the male CEO is recognized of the power of the women's workforce. And what will be the first step to engage the male workers? So I think this question is posed by the Japanese people, how we can engage the male workers, or the male leaders. And
Absolutely.
so the male leaders do understand the trends, and they talk about the necessity of having women in the leadership. But there is not so many male leaders who can actually seriously think that is the case. So how we can involve them in a serious manner and then work together. So this is the question coming from that kind of perspective. So what do you think, both of you?
So I always make this joke because there's so many statistics out there that say, if male leaders who have a daughter, then therefore, pay their employees, their female employees more, are more supportive, are more inclusive, are more likely to have an HR department or a people and culture department that have programs to support females and obviously see and accept these things. So my joke is always that we need more male leaders with daughters, but that is of course something that we cannot choose. And so on a much more serious note, what can we do? And this is where I come in with kind of the timeline of different initiatives coming out there. So in Germany, there's a big company called the Charter of Diversity, and this means that companies sign this charter to commit themselves to diversity, to different principles, civil rights issues, and equality. And these different initiatives reach out to them and talk to them. So it's not only a government ministerial aspect of reaching to these people, but it's also, from my aspect, it's the role of NGOs and of local community people to also reach out to these people to have these discussions. I think it's also important And again, this is probably very cultural because you mentioned the conformity. I think conformity is within human nature. So I don't want you to think that this is something that is only in Japan, but I think we all kind of get, closed into these topics. But I think something that is so empowering, even for, the young females and the young males or anybody on this call, if you think that is something that is important to you, bring that up to your HR department. And to be honest with you, to empower all of you, this is something that I did in my last job. I literally just asked my HR representative if we could have a conversation, an honest conversation about these topics. And slowly but surely, depending on how hierarchical the company is, a lot of times they're quite hierarchical in Germany. And so you have multiple meetings. I mean, slowly but surely that trickles up, right? It's not trickling down, but finally those voices are heard. And so I don't think that there is one answer to that question of how we can have those serious conversations. I wish I had the one and only answer, but I think it takes, it takes a village. It takes all of us mentioning that, and it takes all of those voices. It takes conversations like this for people to finally realize, maybe for an algorithm to come up on their LinkedIn and then to finally see these topics are being talked about. I might look at that study. I might look at a different application as a way to increase female participation, but also having leaders who say, we need to have job applications that also speak to female leaders as a way to increase them within these processes. So I think it really takes all of us, and it takes all of us as multipliers on this call as a way to create a more equal world.
Hamada-san, どうですか? 男性リー
What
ダー
about
は
you and Hamada-san and hardship and involve the male leaders? And are there any success cases? I'm sure there's a small numbers, but so diversity. And so, for those, there are two different types of management who talk about diversity. For those who have exposure in overseas, they talk from their heart. So they have experience being minority, and because they worked overseas, and they have witnessed what is happening overseas and the speed of progress. And also, the company experienced the hardship in the past, the crisis in the past, and SMEs with the employee of 100 located in Aichi Prefecture, maybe Kano-san's constituency, and Ohashi Transport, a logistic company in Ohashi City. And so this company was selected as one of the 100 diversity companies. I have talked to the president of this company many times, the logistics industry, and there tends to be a lot of male workers. And why they're so active in diversity? 1970s, there is a deregulation trend. And so the license to drive a truck was the change from the permission to license to permission. So there's a lot of new entrants enter into this company. So there was the fight over the talents. And because there was a small number of truck drivers, and there was no word such as diversity back then. And so they decided to hire female truck drivers in terms of diversity. So when they come to the safety management, and so that the male and they are quite harsh, use harsh words to communicate about the safetyness to their workers. But when it comes to the female workers, they gently explain about the safety management issues about the truck world and logistics. And so that the company, the president realized that the female could be very good at communicating such a safety issues. And so maybe currently there the proportion of the women and the men's and the leadership is 50-50. And also not just the diversity in terms of sex, they also employed LGBTQ and the minorities as well. So this company started to hire more female because of the sense of crisis. So there's a shortage in the workforce, but that triggered them to recognize the capability of the women. And this president by the name of Nabeshima, I often communicate his message to other companies. It's difficult to change the people's mindset, but by enhancing the intelligence or the knowledge, and they can bring up their awareness, so the people can learn from the other peers. And so why diversity is needed, and the cases of the advanced companies and what is happening outside by learning this. And if you increase your knowledge or intelligence, and then you can change your awareness. It's not going to change your nature or the personality, but you will have a heightened awareness, and then you will feel more motivated to do something different. And the Mercari is another success case, and that is also another company. And the president is by the name of Yamada-san. He's very serious about introducing this diversity. And so he worked in Silicon Valley and he witnessed GAFA activities. And then he studied why they are successful. And they find out that diversity is one of the aspects. So the changes cannot be made by the top-down approach. There are two female key persons involved. And so those two key female workers recognize there's no diversity, and especially that there's not much of the non-Japanese workers is working at the Mercari. So they look into the company carefully in terms of numbers. And so they come up with a number per department, not just the company-wide numbers, and why this person is in a leadership position. So they scrutinize each position of the leadership. And so the management was saying that there's no discrimination in a company, but these two females using this kind of numbers or statistics are convincing those top management that why this is the current the case. A bottom-up approach is also important. So employee cannot just wait. So the employee also has to start to voice their opinions. I understood. So the first case study, and so the city of Seto, I have lived there for about 10 years. And so that is a very conservative area, but overcoming risks. And the key person was the female. I think that is actual case. I think that will make it the change, bring the change to the corporate culture, and also change the mindset of the top management. If that can be done in Seto City, and then it can be done by anyone. Yes, a small and medium-sized company. And that person said, because they are small, we are small, they can easily change. And so I'm sure there are many companies who are having trouble with the hiring, but if they change and they introduce diversity and they can hire more talented people. And so the 5-year, the person, female workers who work for this company for 5 years, and they enter into this company, and she's now from a city. And that why this company? And she said because this company is active in diversity, and they look at the top 100 diversity company and then selected to this company. And it was also gave special awards last year. And also the university students come to these companies to study for their research for the project. So the company who's active in diversity or environmental issues, and many university students who wants to work for such companies. So having this kind of capability will positively. And so what about Swanson-san? So the younger generations and use the sense of value to select company, which company they work for. They use their sense of value to select company to work for.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of the biggest power that we have is that we can, inform ourselves on these decisions. We can, make sure we know what is important to us, questions that should be asked within job interviews. I've also been on a couple of job interview panels, and these are questions that are quite normal, is to ask, what does diversity look like? What does your HR department look like? What does, and especially as a female, what is the role of a female? Could you tell me about the general path of a female at your company? And if they, mention the mommy track, then maybe, that's not the kind of company that you should be working for if that's not what you want. And so that's a really great way to filter out companies, but then also to make it clear what you want from an employer. And when you ask those questions, it signals to the people in the interview, these are important topics that people are asking us about. And if we don't have anything, then maybe we should think about having something if we really want the best of the best people. So this is also a recruiting mechanism that companies at HR, people and culture, people and culture is kind of a term that a lot of people are using in Germany to get away from the more traditional view of, human resources, but we are here to develop the people and to provide them culture. And so if these are ways that, that's generally kind of like a signaling thing. If people are referring it to HR, is this a cool company? Or if it's people and culture, what does that mean with regards to their development, and how are they taking impulses from different interviewers and incorporating that into their corporate strategy, but then also their development strategies. And also an important thing to ask, when you interview, what kind of development do you have? What kind of development systems do you have? This is something that's quite normal in Germany. I'm not sure what it's like in Japan, but also for females, because you want to make sure that you're working for a company. We give them lots of time. You want to make sure that you have a company that cares about you as a person, but then also cares about your development.
Thank you very much. So we've been looking at Germany as a case to look up to, but in the German quota system, don't you still have any issues with the quota system in Germany? So the German law mandates 30%. So being from the businesses, don't they misunderstand that 30% is the maximum level? So maybe one challenge is to go beyond the 30%. So how do you respond to that kind of question?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an important question. So also when it comes to the topic of quotas, is a lot of companies, they saw the 30% as kind of the maximum, but then also other companies, because if you didn't meet the quota, then you were financially penalized. And so a lot of companies said that they were going to increase by 0%. So there was also incentives for companies to not increase females at all, because this was kind of, a little bit of a gap within the law. So it didn't make it completely clear. And so what needs to happen in the next step to make sure that, we say, this is generally the issue with quotas. Not only do we have the externality effect that people think that women aren't qualified, but that kind of generally perpetuate inequity, and it's not really bringing about equality within the system. But it makes us think that, okay, we reached that, we've done our job, our hands are washed, we don't need to do any more. So there's two ways to go about it. I think the most German way in this sense to go about it would be to try, and the first step would be to try and self-commit. So if companies say, okay, we recognize that 30% isn't enough, we met it, but there's so much more to do. In order to achieve full parity, we need to be at 50%, right? From the most basic understanding of equality. And so the option is either companies self-commit to 50%, which some companies do. But unfortunately, I think what history can show us is that this didn't happen in the early 2000s. And so we're generally going to see that, this is kind of my take on it, is that, we're going to stagnate at 30% for a while until there are legal measures and mandates that take place in order for a full 50%. Because before we had, no mandate, we went to 30%. So to see that jump up to 50%, I think is something that is of high aspiration. As I mentioned, the EU wants a goal of 40% by 2026, which I definitely see possible. So if we say we use that in incremental steps, by 2026, we go to 40%. And then by 2030, we go to 50% for full gender equity, is kind of how I see that, how I could see that working. But yes, we shouldn't be happy with the status quo. Unfortunately, I think that's where we are. And so it's, how can we tell this narrative of success, but then we want more, right? So how can we also learn from other countries in that narrative?
Thank you very much. Well, time flies, and now we only have 3 minutes remaining. So from the two of you, if I can have maybe a few words, some of the important message that you want to share with the audience. But lastly, we have one question. So what is the motivation for females to continue with their career? So if possible, what motivates you to continue with your career? So if we could have your opinions from both of you. So starting from Ms. Hamada, please. Can you please? Thank you very much. Well, to me, I have children too. And there's something that you cannot really experience only in child rearing, like the sense of accomplishment or sense of contributing in some way to the society. And so that is why I work in the media. And of course, child rearing is also a very fine way of contributing to society, but the sense of accomplishment is a bit different. So in my case, by working, it's fun to begin with, and I know that I am able to contribute to society in this way. It's not anything really big, but that is something that keeps me going. And also, I think females should also be more economically and financially independent, and that is one reason why we should work. especially given this COVID-19 situation, a lot of single mothers fell into this financial problems. And looking at those people who are financially vulnerable, what happens is that it directly leads to the poverty of children. So you fall in love and you have this romantic marriage, but you still get a divorce, and sometimes your partner might die. So you don't know what's going to happen. So that is why you need to be always prepared to be financially independent. That is the one way to keep control of your own life and have the freedom to choose your own life. That is what I have been conscious about. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, Ms. Swanson, you were nodding your head as you were listening to what was being said. So for Ms. Swanson, so can you tell us your story, please?
Yes. Yeah. So much compassion. Absolutely. I think we're on the same wavelength there. I remember reading this question. I didn't know how to answer it, and I still don't know how to answer it in the most perfect sense. But I think so much of this comes from an intrinsic motivation and need and love for the topic, but also the love for equality. And I think every day I'm motivated by having such discussions and fighting for rights that have been given to us within our constitutions and within legal matters, and as a way to kind of further that discussion. But also when it comes to the topic of female emancipation and empowerment and being financially independent, I mean, these are such key fundamental things that we need to talk about and that need to be in the forefront. And I'm lucky to have a mother who did that and who empowered me and who talked to me about that. And so I think that's what motivates me. I guess it's just a feeling, and it's kind of an intrinsic thing that I can't really describe, kind of like Hamada talked about. But I hope that helps, and I hope all of you find that in your jobs as well, to contribute and to give something good back, because I think there's nothing better than that.
Thank you very much. So that the earlier question about the challenge to Germany, this was a question from Radia Brauer. So yes, so Ms. Swanson, you actually responded to that question earlier. So working with a good coworker and getting good experience leads to a good life. So I think these all come in a package. So just like today, this kind of dialogue and this interaction with people in the audience, and we were able to share this same kind of feeling. So I hope that this gender issue will go beyond the business context. So regardless of your gender, I think it's a matter of freedom to design your own life and have independence and having control over your own life. I think that is the fundamental point. And I hope that it will become possible to talk about these matters more openly going forward after listening to the messages by the last two speakers. That was very, very informative to me. So I once again extend my gratitude. And thank you to everybody who joined us today. So we were not able to cover all the questions that came in, but I think we were able to provide answers to a good portion of the questions that came in the keynote as well as in our dialogues. And I tried to moderate to my best of my ability, but I apologize if I've had any shortcomings. But I hope that we will be able to continue with this kind of seminar. So once I certainly look forward to seeing you again in one of these seminars. So I hope that you will stay with us in the series of these seminars. And also, once after we conclude this event, for those people who registered, we will be contacting you by email, asking you to answer the questionnaires. So we hope that, each time you rejoin us, first, I think Ms. Hamada was in the first session, but the more we come back again, I think we are really trying to narrow down our focus points, and that is how I feel. So in our next session, I hope that we want to make it into an even better session next time. So please do respond to those questionnaires. And also, if you have any other questions to the KAS, of course, I would encourage you to ask questions. So thank you very much, Ms. Swanson, Ms. Hamada, and also Bauer-san, and also people who joined us. And thank you to everybody who made today's session possible. I would like to once again extend my gratitude that made this session possible. Thank you very much for a wonderful session this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.